Welcome to I-24 News Defense, a weekly look at strategic affairs, security, and intelligence in cooperation with Israel Defense Magazine. In this special edition, we look back 41 years at the Yom Kippur War that changed Israel forever. 41 years have passed since an Arab coalition launched a massive surprise attack on Israeli positions on October 6, 1973. The Yom Kippur War is etched in the Israeli collective memory as a political, military, but mainly an intelligence failure. And even now, decades later, it's still an open wound. Joining me to look at this war, to look back 41 years in the studio, is Amnon Lord, a veteran Israeli journalist and author of The Lost Generation, referring to those who took part in that war. Thanks very much for being with me. Intelligence analyst Yossi Melman, of course, and also I-24 News editor Eitan Adok, who's written extensively on the subject. I want to begin, some of you, you two have come from the perspective of also having took part, having fought in the war, and seeing it from an analyst perspective decades later. I want to first begin with new quotes that came out from Eli Zeira, the military intelligence chief at the time in 1973. Almost every time new quotes seem to come out on every anniversary. Let's just begin with one thing he said that I'll read out. It is easy to pin the failure on me, he says. Who else would they blame? The military defense system that failed, the Air Force which wasn't ready, the chief of staff who did not deploy forces to the north. So, first of all, Yossi, as time passes, it seems it's easier to rewrite history over and over. Is that what he's doing here?
Surely, he's rewriting the history, his personal history, and he's trying to influence the history of Israel. He was blamed for the intelligence failure, not for the Air Force failure. He was blamed for not preparing the intelligence to come up with the right estimate. It's amazing, but hours before the war broke out, he and his subordinates in the military intelligence still talked about low probability that a war would break out within, which eventually did within hours. Eli Zeira should have shut up his mouth, should have been free the Israel of the public discourse of his perceptions, and I think it's shameful that he's trying time after time to present himself as, well, not only to purify and clear himself, but also to present him as a victim. He's not a victim. He deserved the punishment, and even more, he was just fired not to be the head of intelligence, and he's trying to rewrite history, unfortunately.
Amnon, Zeira puts the responsibility also on the political leadership.
I'd like to,
do you agree with that? You look already like you disagree with Yossi.
Absolutely. I don't sympathize with Eli Zeira, but I think this blunt statement that he said is absolutely correct, because the blunder, the mehdal, the omission, the failure is not of intelligence, but of decision making. And I'll quote from a CIA document written after the war, I think maybe a year or two. It seems that the Israeli leadership did not take into account the implications of its decision on the 5th of October, not the 6th, the 5th of October, Friday. And again, at the early hours of 6th of October, not to act in a preventive attack. A day earlier, Israel sent a message to Kissinger, to the American administration on Friday, assuring the Americans that we have no intent of going into attack on the Egyptians or the Syrians, and so that all the concentrations of forces on the Suez Canal and the Golan Heights have no justification. That means that Israel already promised the Americans not to have to launch any preventive attack from the air, only they forgot to announce it to the Chief of Staff and to Benny Pellet, the commander of the Air Force. If they did, they wouldn't waste so much energy, time, and especially the entire Air Force was not ready for the outbreak of fire at 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
So if you're saying from these quotes there was a degree of appropriate assessment of the level of incoming
At
threat.
the night between 4 and 5th of October, there were 3 pieces of information that toppled the entire assessment. First, there was the message to the head of Mossad, Zamir, with the code for war. This caused him to go to London. Then there was the air train or the airlift of the Soviets out of Damascus, out of Syria and Egypt. And the third one was the results of aerial photos which showed that the Egyptians and the Suez Canal look like they look in the photo, they looked like a tiger which is about to
pounce. Eitan, I hear you chiming in a little bit. So if there was a degree of information, yet there was a massive failure, was this largely a failure of different key people and key divisions communicating with each other?
Well, Eliezer can accuse the others who should be blamed. It doesn't clean him. Dado Elazar, who was the commander-in-chief of the army, was found also responsible, so he had to leave the army, and later on Golda and Dayan. So he's not the only one, but he's the main one. I mean, he's the first one. But this is a series. I mean, I agree with both. First of all, there is a problem. There is a failure in terms of intelligence. This is the first thing. Zeira, he's trying to rewrite the history, that's for sure. It's not the first time that he lies, you know. He's the one also who sold Marwan Ashraf, this spy that the Mossad, thanks to him, the Mossad could give the launch a few hours before and tell that the war was coming. And he said he gave the name in 2003 to a journalist we know the story, and then Marwan Ashraf was probably killed by the Egyptian because he was recognized as the spy for Israel. The government, there was also not only a problem with intelligence, but also with the political leaders, as said Amnon. That's true, because during 1 year Sadat was showing signs, wanted to bring to a political solution. He was going in 2 ways: the military and the political. But Dayan and Golda were not didn't want to hear about that, because I said, Dayan, Sharm el-Sheikh is better. We prefer Sharm el-Sheikh without peace than peace without Sharm el-Sheikh. Though there was no will from the Israeli politics to make any concession. But this theory of Aman of Zeira to put a blame on the political leaders is something that we've heard. Amnon Kipnis, Igal Kipnis, a historian, wrote about it in 2012. And there was the third failure, which was operational. It's true that the Israeli army, was not ready.
I want to talk about another element beyond operational, though, that's always brought up, because a huge part of the battle, of course, in any kind of conflict is perception, both the people's perception and the government's perception. And there is this kind of widely held notion that after 1967, after this incredible military victory in the Six-Day War, that there was an air of invincibility socially and within the military, within the government. How big of a role, Amnon, did that play, do you think, in the failure in Yom Kippur?
You mean the overconfidence?
Right.
Of course, this was beyond all assessments. Flew the flag which said the Arabs are incapable. We can see any detail of their preparations, and we still believe that the Arabs will not be able to launch an offensive with 5 or 7 bridgeheads over the canal.
So speaking of the Arab military doctrine. I want to go back to some of what some of the quotes that were released over this weekend. Another one that he said, for all the fans, for the Ze'ira fans here, he says, overall, I was a staff officer who no one listened to. Today I know we didn't understand the Arabs. PM Golda Meir and Defense Minister Moshe Dayan spoke nonsense at the cabinet meetings, but I believed it unacceptable that the head of military intelligence scold the prime minister. I'll just go to one more that's kind of on the same tone. On the same tone, we assumed that what the Egyptians want, they can't do, and what they could do, they didn't want. The airfields in Egypt were being renovated. Experts told me it would take months to bring them to readiness, and so on. So was there a fundamental misunderstanding, Yossi, of the Arab military doctrine? Is there still?
Well, these are two separate issues. It's wrong to provide these quotes from Eli Ze'ira.
Yeah,
he doesn't deserve to be quoted at all. You know, in Japan, people in his position would have conducted their failures in a different way. If Golda Meir, according to Ze'ira, did not understand the Arabs, all right, and she talked nonsense as she claimed, he was their chief advisor. He was their chief advisor on Arabs. He should have told her, Mr. Prime Minister, you are wrong in your perceptions about the Arabs. Who provided the perceptions to the cabinet about the Arab capabilities? Eli Ze'ira and the intelligence. Now, of course, if I may allow one more sentence, of course it was a general failure, not just the intelligence. Operationally, I agree it was a military failure. It was a political failure by the leadership. I agree with Amnon too. But above all, it was the concept, the perception of Israelis that the Arabs are inferior, they are incapable, and it was the Israeli euphoric and arrogant. It's still what?
Is that still the case today?
No, I don't think so. I mean, the
But
security
I
is
would
taking the Arabs' security establishment is taking the opponents and the enemies more seriously. Absolutely.
I'll just give Eitan a chance to respond. Go ahead.
Yeah, for this question, first of all, the situation is not the same. Syria is not a threat anymore as it used to be, and Egypt either.
Well, it doesn't have to be armies.
Yeah.
It can be asymmetrical warfare. It doesn't have to be a classic army.
That's
today.
true that the fact that the way Israel looked at the Arab at that time was part of a concept that they call it the conceptia, and part of it was the fact that Sadat, for example, was a gray guy. You know, after Nasser, he was a little guy who wouldn't do it, but he did it. So there was a big this concept, Hebrew concept, and the fact that Israel saw himself so superior play a very big role. One thing about Ze'ira has to be said. There was something which is called a special means that Amman had, a very special device which was in
Amman military intelligence.
Yeah, and that Ze'ira, because he was so sure, because Ze'ira didn't want to see the capabilities, the capacity of doing it, but he was judging the intention, as he decided that the intention was not there, so he didn't do anything, and Israel had a technological mean to prevent and to know about this war. He did not operate it. I think Amnon knows something about it. He knows about it.
That Israel had the intelligence ability?
On that point, the special means.
It would bring some more knowledge, but I would quote a senior officer in this unit that operated this device. He told me when I interviewed him for my book, I knew him from back then. He was a major then, now he's a colonel, long retired. He said, those who did... אלה שלא רצו לראות מלחמה בחיטים, לא היו רואים אותה גם בשעורים. Those who
didn't.
Even if we had been warned about it, we wouldn't have believed it. This is, but the fact is that the politics and Dayan and Dado were waiting for some signs. So the fact that they thought that everything was all right, they didn't do anything.
But I would like to add something that it's sort of the other side of the coin of how the Israelis assess the Arabs. It also how we assess ourselves. the head of the Mossad, ex-head, Ephraim Halevi, lectured last year in a gathering of intelligence officers. He said Israel created an image in the world, and especially in the eyes of the Americans, that it is a regional superpower. And of course, it prevented us from, I mean, if our deterrence failed in 73, and this was the meaning of they're going to start a war against us, it means we lost our deterrence, we lost our own image.
The question of where Israel's deterrence stands today is indeed also a very important one. I wish we could get to that also. There are a lot of other things I would like to ask all three of you. But unfortunately, that's all the time we have. Eitan Adoka, Amnon Lod, and Yossi Melman, thank you very, very much for being with me.